This is Audiovisual Cultures, the podcast that explores different areas of the arts and cultural production with me, Paula Blair. Visit patreon.com/AV Cultures to find out more and to join the pod. I am really excited to welcome today Derrik Jordan to Audiovisual Cultures podcast. We have not dealt with music nearly enough on this show, so we're going to try and rectify that in quite a big way today. So I'm really, really delighted to welcome Derrik. Hello, Derrik. How are you today?
Hi, Paula. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing okay, thanks. It's lovely to see your beautiful backdrop. I know on the audio people won't see this, but I'll try and get a lovely screenshot of you for our materials. But yes, you've got a really beautiful backdrop that really expresses what you're here to talk about today. So we're going to talk about your show, the World Fusion show. But just before we get into that, is it okay if I ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about you? Because I know you've got an extensive background in music in a lot of ways. So if it's okay, I'll let you talk us through some of that.
Okay, I'll try not to rant too much. But yeah, I've been in music really my whole life. I was inspired when I was a teenager, well, even earlier. At 9 years old, I heard the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show. I saw them and just begged my mom to get me a guitar. And I got a guitar the next week and started playing. And of course, I was terrible. I was just, a kid, but very inspired by what I'd heard. And then I got into a lot of other music over time as a teenager, like Jimi Hendrix and James Taylor and eventually Stevie Wonder. And I always got into, I really wanted to write songs. That was my initial interest in music and playing in bands. So, hey, who wouldn't want to be like the Beatles and have all those screaming girls? And all that. So I started out that way and then ended up going to college, Bennington College in Vermont in the U.S., where I met my mentor, a master drummer named Milford Graves, who also was a herbalist, acupuncturist, martial artist, and scientist, teacher, very strong and intense mind, who was really about bringing together many different disciplines. And that's kind of what he left his students with, this idea that you had to be into everything. You couldn't just do one thing. So I got very interested in drumming by meeting him at Bennington because he was a master drummer. But really, when I first heard him play the congas, the hand drums, I felt like he was talking on the drum. And I didn't really know that was possible. I was a singer-songwriter. I had no idea about drumming and this kind of expression. So I really wanted to learn that. So I started studying with him and also continued to work on composition with other people at Bennington and writing songs every day and playing in bands. And I was very busy with music in college. And then continued on in that thing, but also after leaving Bennington, moved back to New York to continue my studies with Milford Graves. And then also got into more writing music and bands and eventually came back to Vermont, playing in more bands, and eventually went back to New York, commuting to sing jingles and work in the songwriting world in New York. I've just been doing many, many jobs, including writing for orchestra, all kinds of chamber groups, but always utilizing this world music, world fusion influence that Milford gave me, exposed me to. African, Indian, Brazilian, really opened up the world of world music to me. And I just kept walking down that road. That's really why I have the World Fusion show, which we've now done for almost 4 years. And I get to interview and bring wonderful musicians from all over the planet and share their world fusion music. I'm not a traditionalist. I never have been that interested in traditional music of any kind. I'm really interested in how the different musics are blended together. And there's so many ways to do that. And world fusion is that. And so that's what I present in my show.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Derrik. I'm hoping that in a bit we can try and get into what you really mean by that fusion to see if you can tease that out for us a little bit. But before we get into nitty-gritty, can you just outline a little bit more the World Fusion show? And of course, that will have changed massively how you can even make that at the moment. And it's great that you've continued to still do that. And it's so much of it is available on YouTube, which is wonderful. But could you just outline the World Fusion show a little bit for us and tell us a bit about the format and the guests and how it works?
Well, the show is, as I say in my intro, we really showcase world fusion composers, musicians, and innovators in world fusion. And world fusion is so many different things. It's not just one thing. Like it could be, for instance, a steel pan player who plays Bach or writes for orchestra and composes in different ways. That's one way. So using a world music instrument in a non-traditional way would be a way of showing world fusion. I generally don't have jazz musicians on or people who specifically do reggae or country, bluegrass, a particular kind of music. I avoid different American styles, blues, jazz, this kind of thing, because it's too specific and it doesn't draw on the connection to world cultures. There are some exceptions. I'm going to be having a singer who's from New Orleans in the near future, because New Orleans is kind of world fusion. I mean, it's like the nature of that music is a hodgepodge of many different styles. But yeah, we showcase all these wonderful people, but there's so many ways to present it. And I really love being able to share these guests who bring their unique styles to our audience. Now, we do a new show every 2 weeks, and we've now hit episode number 98, which is, I'm like, we're going to hit 100 like real soon. I'm really excited about this. Going to have to celebrate that we're able to do this. And yeah, the format is I interview my guests and they provide videos of their music, which we share excerpts of. And then the other part of the show that people even seem to like the best is because I play 20 different instruments, I'll jam with my guests and I play violin, percussion, all different kinds of strings. We really try to showcase and we improvise together on the show. And that's a lot of fun because I don't know what's going to happen and neither do they. So that's been kind of a nice thing to do and really demonstrates the fusion part. And most of my guests are also very good improvisers. And so that's a lot of fun for me. And that's really the most creative part for me in the show and challenging sometimes. Some of my guests are so good that I have to, really study their music to be able to play with them. And it's a challenge sometimes.
It's really enjoyable as well, and I think hugely informative that you take time during the show to speak to them about their personal lives. And so many of your guests are from such a range of places, and I think places that you wouldn't even associate necessarily with music culture in any way, because it'd be a struggle for any lay person who isn't an expert, certainly, to pin down what kind of music would come from certain places. So it's really amazing that you take that time to really talk through with your guests their backgrounds and how they've come to the music that they play and how they've come to be in a band, if it's a band that they're part of, and how they've come together and that sort of thing. I mean, how do you go about finding people for your show? Are a lot of people that you've picked up along the way because you yourself are a performer and you've done all of these things, or how does that work?
Well, it works in many ways, and I use the internet, of course, to find people, like Facebook. I also have many friends, people I've played with over the years. One of my best ways to find exceptional guests is to ask my guests who've been on the show, who are the most amazing players, who their favorites are. So I'll use that as well. As a great example of what you were saying, one of my recent guests is a group called Olax. And I don't know if you saw this one, but they are really unusual because the woman, it's a duo, and the woman is from Siberia. Okay. And I mean, it gets 90 degrees below zero in the winter, right? Okay. It's like, I can't even imagine living there, but she spent her youth out in nature, imitating bird sounds and animal sounds, which she does. And she does what they call neo-shamanic music. Her partner is an Armenian guy named Andreas, and he's also a singer and plays percussion. And they have a really unique style. They were actually on America's Got Talent, and that's how I bumped into them on the internet. And they blew away the judges and the audience. And I reached out to them, and they said yes. I was so happy to share their music. And in the interview, Zarina, who was the female singer, she describes her amazing background and a lot of her culture, and it's a horse culture, and how she's connected and they're codependent on the horses for food, shelter, clothing, everything. So you get a little deeper with my show into some of, like you're saying, the background cultures of people. especially someone like Zarina. And I just think it's really interesting. So the show is not a general music show. It's a little nerdy. We get into cool, interesting, deeper aspects of the music and the cultures that people represent.
Well, we love nerdy on this show as well.
You're good. Well, we're in the right place then.
Yeah, we love getting into real detail and stuff. So that's why I was so fascinated, because I think it really helped, especially if you're encountering music you've just never heard before or that you could have even imagined existed. It's so helpful actually to the viewer to go through those people's backgrounds and the mixture of where they've come from. It just feels like it makes the music make more sense in a way, because you can start to hear the melding of things, if that makes sense. I mean, I'm not an expert at all, but that's how it sounded to me, because I did watch some of that episode and the stories are really fascinating, and I was starting then, because with my analytical brain, I'm starting to think, well, their stories are helping me learn from a non-musical background why the melding is making sense, if that makes sense to you.
Sure. Well, it creates a context. It informs the listener. And then when you hear the music, you're that much more drawn in because you have a reference for where this might be coming from. And you bring your own imagination to it as well, of course.
Can I get you to help me work through that idea of the fusion then? So you've got this category of world music, which you've explained really nicely, which seems to be stuff that's from all over the world, and you're trying to have less focus on anything that seems to be purely US. But then there's this fusion element where it's mixings of these different kinds of music. So, I mean, would you have another kind of example? Is it different styles? Is it different specific instruments? What exactly is the fusion element of it?
Right. Well, sometimes it's people will play an instrument that we're familiar with, like the violin, right? But they might use it in ways that we're not normally hearing it. Like, I've got a wonderful guest, Laith Sadiq, who is a violinist who's from Jordan. And he plays really very strong Arabic influence in his music. But we have so many people, a group I'm thinking of, again, with 98 shows, there's a lot. I could come up with a lot of examples, but a group called Kodako Brass, they play Ghanaian fusion. So they are 3 Ghanaian percussionists and 1 American percussionist who studied a lot in Ghana. And then they have a bass player from Antigua, a keyboard player from Japan, and 2 horn players from the US. And they bring these elements together and play kind of a funky, somewhat Fela, if you know Fela Kuti from Nigeria, funky dance music with horns. So they're fairly a dance band, and they live in Boston and they play very popular dance parties there. So they really are high energy dance music, but have this very strong Ghanaian percussive element. And one of their drummers from Ghana actually grew up in the Royal Palace in Ghana and was part of the traditional Ghanaian musical heritage. So they very authentic traditional elements, but then these other non-traditional elements from other countries. So there's so many, like I said, there's so many ways to do world fusion, right? Where you blend in any number of ways. It could be the instrument, it could be the style, and how you're trying to incorporate various styles into your music. I look for people really who are trying to do something original. For me, it has to be something that moves me. The hardest part of my job is saying no to people if I don't feel like they're reached the standard that I'm trying to share with my audience.
As you brought it up there, just to ask about your audience, do you know much about the background of the audience? Again, is it itself a mixture of people? Is it a mixture of people who would be experts, as well as people like me who just dip in and out of things and are willing to try stuff? Who is your demographic, if you like?
I'm not sure I can answer that very well. We actually won a national award for Best Entertainment and Art Series in Public Access TV, which is a lovely thing, except Public Access TV doesn't measure their viewership. They don't have any numbers to give me or analysis of their demographic. But I have been shown on over 100 public access TV stations in 26 states. I know that. I can't break it down for you beyond that. We also have a podcast for the show on SoundCloud and iTunes. I have some numbers for that, over 60,000 listeners, various listeners. My most popular episode on the YouTube channel, which is called The World Fusion Show, of course, has 13,000 views. So that's great. And that continues to go up. That was an episode we did with Masamba Diop, who's a world famous Senegalese talking drummer. The drummer is called the Tama drum. He was actually featured on the Black Panther soundtrack. And you can hear his Tama drum from the first scene to the last scene in the Black Panther. And Masamba has been for decades, a member of Baba Maal's band, which he's played in like 120 different countries around the world. He's really well known. And basically his drum functions as the way we think of the lead guitar in a rock band. It's the foil to the singer, to Baba Maal. So Baba will sing and they'll hold the mic up to the Tama drum. And Masamba will play kind of the way the lead guitar player would play to take a lead to answer the solo. It's similar, but of course different because it's not a guitar. And the Tama has a long history of playing. And I've played with Masamba here in the US and in Senegal. He's a friend and we've done a lot of work together and he's just a great guy. There's so many ways that we bring the music together.
So before you were able to do studio sessions with a lot of artists, and obviously that will have changed with recent events. Is it the case now that the artists are sending you videos of their older work, or are they recording things remotely and putting it together? I mean, how does it work these days for you?
Yeah, it is working like that. We used to do live improvisations when I was working at BCTV in Brattleboro, but because of the lockdown, it's been closed. So we've done various workarounds. One is that I will get my artists to record a solo video of them playing, and then I will basically play along with that and try to pretend that it's live. Sometimes, well, depending on how good I'm able to do that, you would think it is live a lot of the times. Most of the time, I seem to be able to pull that off. But now that we're in lockdown mode, I've stopped doing the live or this kind of improvisation overdub with their video. The new format that I'm using is just taking pre-recorded videos from my guests. And that's been the last few shows, just because I wanted to keep the show going. I felt it was more important to keep the show going, so I'm not doing the live music right now. But we'll get back to it. I mean, things will open up again and we'll be able to do that again. But we have a great audio engineer and we have 3 cameras at BCTV, so the quality is very high. Somewhat limited now more with my Zoom calls. But it's still fun, and I get to showcase these fantastic artists, and I feel like the workaround is better than not doing the show at all. So I'm just trying to keep everything going forward.
Sure. But when you would have been in the studio, would you have had an audience with you, or would it have been just the crew that you were working with?
Yeah, just my crew. I have a video producer who does the camera work and switches between cameras. He's very good. And I have a great audio engineer I've worked with for many years. Now we've done so many shows that we've got our thing down at this point pretty well. I mean, I was nervous in the beginning because even though I've done music in so many ways, I wasn't sure I would be very good at interviewing people. And I think I was a little nervous in the beginning about that. But, I also have been a school teacher teaching music for 14 years. So I'm comfortable standing in front of people and talking. And I'm somewhat expert at my field. So I thought, okay, this is a good thing. And let's see if I can just draw on that. My comfortableness in front of middle school and high school kids, right? And that worked out well. And eventually I calmed down and I became less nervous. And it's, part of it's just being an improviser too, having improvised my whole life, doing music, improvising. It's sort of the same job when you're interviewing and improvising and reacting and trying to pick up on what people are saying. I mean, I will do an interview, a pre-interview with my guests, just to get my questions together. It goes a lot smoother when I do that. So I have a script, basically, of questions that I'm going to ask, but I go off script a lot. If someone might say something during the interview, I'll say, cool, let's go there and find out what that's about, because it just feels more casual and more interesting to do it that way.
Yes, I find if you're having a conversation, it's more relaxing and enjoyable. And sometimes you can get more out of people as well.
Yes.
I was wondering as well, because as you mentioned, you play a lot of instruments yourself. I've always been very envious of people who have that natural ability with music. And obviously, you work incredibly hard at it as well. But I think there has to be just something in you that means that you can, I had an uncle who could just pick up any instrument and make beautiful sounds with it. It's an incredible gift to have. But I was wondering, when you do have the opportunity to jam or improvise with other musicians, how do you choose which instrument to play?
Yeah, no, right. It's a good question, right? So, because I have a lot of choices. Well, of course, my guest usually plays one instrument. Not always, but most of the time. They're quite good at one instrument. And so I will try to think about, well, what might complement them? And when we do the live music part of the show, I will always play more than one. So we have usually two or more pieces that we'll do together at the end of every show. And I will use a different instrument for each piece. And I always record usually a third piece as well, which we use in a future episode for a sampler show. So I do sampler shows. I think we've done 8 of them now, where they're only the live music. I don't do interviews. It's just a way to show our audience all the variety of guests we have, but they're always music that were not featured on previous shows. So it's a way to enhance the listening experience for people and to show more about the combinations of instruments and stuff. I don't play wind instruments. I'm not very good at it. But during the lockdown, I decided to challenge myself. So I've been practicing the trombone. And it's extremely difficult for me to play the trombone. I'm just so bad at it, but I've made some progress. I'm starting to make some progress. It's interesting. So I don't know if I'll ever play it on my show, but I'm working at it, and maybe someday I will.
Well, yeah, the point is to have fun with it as well.
Yeah, it's this idea of beginner's mind. And I think that as an improviser, that's a great way, and a way that I like to approach music in general as a composer and as a player, with a beginner's mind. Always thinking, I'm not so good. I'm not such an expert. I don't really know what to do. And not to fall back on things that are so comfortable. Try to push myself a bit.
When you're composing music yourself, would you refer to the pieces you compose as fusion or world fusion? Do you try and compose to that? How does that work? Or do you take commissions? Are you asked to do specific things? Or is it something you get ideas and you have to get them down? How does your composition work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am very influenced by many different styles of music around the world. So, for instance, if I'm writing for orchestra or chamber groups, I might really try to take a specific style, like, let's say, Brazilian, or a specific African style. Of course, there are many African styles. Indian, what a flamenco, various things, Latin styles, and try to incorporate specific elements of that style into the work I'm doing. So I'm actually not that interested in classical music, although I love Bach and some classical composers. I'm not really that interested in doing that or using the orchestra to present that. I'm more interested in the combination, in the fusion, trying to get them to play these very syncopated world rhythms, phrases, scales, harmonies, and try to bring that in to the work. Sometimes it's more obvious than others. I have a premiere that's coming out in a month with a string orchestra that is called Suite for an Imaginary Country. And what it is 3 pieces that are world fusion, but it's not exactly clear what the influences are in these pieces. And that's kind of fun because it's like in the cracks. It's like something not neither this nor that. And that's a piece for string orchestra. That's going to be a video presentation here in Brattleboro, and that'll come out. There's no live audience. It's going to be done, as we are a lot of times now, as a video performance that will then be shared later, a video situation. I've been doing a bunch of those things with different groups that I work with. It's interesting. It's certainly not like playing for a live audience. You don't have that interaction. But it's better than nothing, and we're getting the music out this way.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I have to ask while it comes to mind, do you ever get any Irish music in any of the fusions that you deal with? Would you consider that as part of world music, or is that a bit too Western?
It's very Western. You're right.
Yeah.
I would love to, but so far, all the Irish people that I've heard are doing very specifically traditional Irish music. If I could find some Irish musicians that are making a fusion, I would be interested in doing that. So I'm open to it, but I just haven't heard it yet.
I'll keep an ear out, and if I hear of anybody doing something that might be of interest to you, I'll point them your way.
Please do. I'd love to know. Doing
Yeah.
all kinds of things that way.
You talk quite a lot about inclusion through the diversity of the music, which is a really lovely, important sentiment. All of us in, I suppose, what we would call white Western countries, I mean, they are not that. We are all mixtures of everything. And it's really important to really be able to reflect and celebrate that. So it feels like that's what your show is really important for as well, to really just demonstrates and shows how much that's happening and how much it exists in the world.
It's true. That's really the purpose of the show, is to embrace the world in all its various ways and expose people to music they might not have bumped into in their normal listening. People, I think, are a lot more diverse in terms of their interests musically and culturally than we give credit for. And sometimes they just haven't been exposed to it. But of course now, with the internet, there's a lot more opportunity to hear these kinds of things.
Is there anything else you think is really important that you really wanted to put out there and say today about your work, about your show?
Well, like I say, I've done so many things over the years. I used to sing jingles in New York. I was a professional singer. I used to sing demos. Songwriters would hire me to sing demos to present. I actually sang a demo that was recorded by Celine Dion. So I used to work with really high-level songwriters, and I had worked with wonderful people in the city when I was commuting down there for about 9 years, and wrote and did a lot of songwriting collaboration with people also. There's so many different chapters of my life. I'm in this chapter now where I'm doing my show, and in some ways it brings many aspects of my career together, which is nice, that I get to bring it all together this way. It's a beautiful way to share the diversity, as you said. I don't know really what else to add. I think I would just say, please invite your audience to go to the YouTube channel, The World Fusion Show, and click on the episodes. We've got 98 episodes up there. And I actually am about to do 2 episodes celebrating my mentor, Milford Graves, who is, I was saying earlier, is an African-American man who has deeply, deeply impacted so many people. In fact, his last work, and perhaps in some ways maybe his most lasting work, was work on heart research. He was a scientist and recorded heartbeats, and worked with some scientists and doctors in Bologna, Italy, and did a incredible performance where he played the drums and had human stem cells on stage and videotaped them differentiating because of the sound and rhythms of his playing. And actually, he has a patent on that process. And these doctors and scientists that were working with him were completely blown away by this work that he'd done over many years in researching heartbeats and how they were affected by drumming and rhythms and tone of drumming. So Milford was really a free thinker and extraordinary person. He had many obituaries. You can look him up in Rolling Stone magazine, in The Guardian, in all kinds of important magazines commemorating his life and the work that he was doing. But he's known mostly as a drummer and as a free jazz drummer even. But he was so much more than that. He got me interested in herbalism, and I used to go out in the woods to identify plants. I spent many years trying to find wild American ginseng, and finally, after many years, found it and brought him to this very large patch of 100 plants and got to show him this amazing find that I had made. So I felt able to give back to him in my own ways, in various ways. But he was so instrumental, and when you hear these episodes celebrating his life, you'll see all these amazing people talking about how he impacted their lives. And it's just, I'm so grateful to be able to share that in this way with people.
Yeah, that sounds like a really fitting tribute. So those will be the next 2 episodes for you. Those will be April.
Episode 99 and 100.
Ah.
Yes, hit the mark with Milford. Yeah, it's pretty exciting. Yeah.
That's really beautiful. It's such an odd year, I think, whether it's to do with the pandemic or not. So many of us have lost somebody special, but it's so special as well to be able to give that kind of tribute to somebody. That's really wonderful.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just so grateful to be able to do that. And it's just beautiful to hear each individual give their own testimony about, because he impacted people so deeply and in so many ways, but also very similar ways too. This idea of to be really expert at something that you need to sort of know so much in such depth about your subject and in so many ways, and not limit yourself to just one aspect of the study.
And I love what you said right at the beginning, that Milford Graves had told you that idea of be into everything.
Yes.
I feel like that's a really important sentiment as well, because to just be a musician, but to be a musician, a scientist, but also somebody who cares that much about other people, to put all of that knowledge together and to put it to such good in the world that's going to have a lasting legacy. That's really, really beautiful.
That's right. And Paula, I feel like that now that he's passed, that I am trying to carry on his legacy. And I'm able to do that in many ways, but certainly through the show, the World Fusion Show. That's one way I can share some, important aspect of what Milford taught me.
Great. As well as the World Fusion Show on YouTube, do you have anywhere else you would like to point people to find out more about your work? So your website and that sort of thing?
My website, DerrickJordan.com. Derrik is spelled Derrik, and DerrickJordan.com. Just go there. I have like 17 CDs. I do a lot of CDs for other people, as well as lots of CDs of my original music and all kinds of world music styles. And it's really a lot to look through. And you can listen to and check out the music and see what you like, and tell your friends. And please, I'd ask your guests to share the show, the World Fusion Show, and my music with their friends. And if they find something they like and they want to share.
Brilliant. Yeah, we absolutely will do that. Well, Derrik Jordan, I've learned loads talking to you today, and it's been a really lovely conversation. I hope you've got something out of it as well. Yeah, I can't thank you enough for your time. Yeah. It's been great.
Thank you so much, and for this opportunity to share my music and my work with your audience. It's really nice.
This has been a Cozy Peapod production with me, Paula Blair. The music is Common Ground by Airtone, used under a non-commercial 3.0 Creative Commons license, and is available at ccmixter.org. We are AV Cultures Pod on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, and you can also join the conversation on Discord. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe on your favourite podcast app, including YouTube if you find auto captions useful, and please share with your networks. You'll find links and ways to contact us at audiovisualcultures.wordpress.com. We're always really happy to hear from potential guests and ways to improve the show. As well as supporting the pod and receiving member benefits over on Patreon, you can also help at buymeacoffee.com/PEA Blair. Thanks so much for listening. Catch you next time.